September 11th, 9/11, the Twin Towers. These are phrases you've probably heard. You might know a little bit about what they mean, you might know loads, or you might not really know much at all. But the story is an important one because it's about an attack on America that changed the world 20 years ago. Not only has it shaped history, but 9/11 has had a huge impact on events in the news then and also now. First, we're going to hear from people who were your sort of age when it happened. They've told us what it was like being a young American when their country went through such a dramatic event. Carrie, Walter and Rachel were all children at the time of the attacks, living in different parts of the United States. We spoke to them about what they remember from the day.
New York City is one of my favorite cities on the entire planet.
I was 14 years old. I was living in Queens, New York.
We had never gone to New York, but I saw it in movies. It was like, the city of lights.
I can remember exactly where I was when it happened because it was my first full day of high school.
It was just like a regular morning. We got up, got ready for school.
The kind of like teacher's assistant came like running in, and she like grabbed our teacher and was like, the two of them were like looking at each other like all hectic. And it was just like weird. It was so out of character.
And I'm like yapping, about whatever. And my mom is just like shushing us. I remember she got angry. She was like, you guys need to shut up. And that's not something she said often.
And I remember one of my classmates ran in and said that the World Trade Center, something happened, there had been fire or a bomb. He actually got in trouble because the teacher said that's not funny.
Our teacher came back in and she was like, just to let you guys know that something has happened today in America. Why would you make this announcement and not tell it? What happened? Like, she didn't say if it was a bad or a good thing. She just said something happened today in America.
And it was like, the United States was attacked, like New York was attacked, the Pentagon, all this stuff.
So as the day went on, that's when you kind of realize like, okay, something's happening. I remember using a payphone to call my grandmother because my aunt worked at World Trade number 7. And so I knew she was in her way to work. And so I remember calling my grandmother and asking her and saying, do you know where Aunt Pam is? And her saying, I'm watching the news. I don't know where she is.
Just like watching the TV and, it just kept showing the attack over and over again.
I remember my teacher at the time, she was just sad. Like she was very, very sad.
You turn on the radio and every radio station was the news. Like the hip hop station we would normally listen to was the news. And so it was, you were scared because you were like, what's going on?
I'm like 8. I didn't know what people I think were capable of.
And then we kind of just had to have a conversation at school. Like people do terrible things and we don't really know what's going to happen from here on out, but this is what it is.
We went back to school and my first class was gym class in the basement of our high school, and you could actually smell smoke. Like you could smell smoke miles away.
Very anxious, very frightened for sure. And at school, like we started doing all these like drills. It's like to go under your desk if something happened.
I remember my aunt went back to Lower Manhattan to work. And I remember her telling me that sometimes she would sit in her office with her coat on and her purse ready to run. People were, they were terrified. They didn't know what was going to happen.
And then there's those images that were all over in the days to come, like the days afterwards, that are iconic at this point. But it was just, it was in those following days that I really started to recognize, like, wow, like that was a problem. That was a big deal.
New York comes back from everything, It's because the whole world is in that city, and so it's like, you're taking down like New York, America, but people from the entire world are living there, and the community is so strong there.
You hear a lot of people say never forget, and that's something I think that is, that I think now that I talk about my memories because you don't want people to forget it.
20 years ago, the world was enjoying the beginning of a new millennium. At the centre of the world was the United States. It was at the heart of international politics and it had military bases across the world. The country was also welcoming a new president into the White House.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
George Bush became president at the start of 2001 and spent his first months in office meeting other countries' leaders. To them, he was now in charge of the world's most influential nation. Meanwhile, American culture could be seen in the daily lives of people across the planet. A comedy show called Friends was being shown on TV channels all over the world. US musicians were selling millions of albums, and American-made films dominated cinemas. Nowhere showed America's global importance more than New York City. It was home to many of those musicians and TV shows, and huge businesses like banks and international organisations had headquarters there. At the centre of New York were the enormous Twin Towers. The buildings were 110 stories high, and thousands of people worked in the offices. Al-Qaeda is an Islamist extremist group who blamed America for many of the world's problems. They had twisted beliefs which they used to justify violent attacks. In 1998, the group began to plan an attack known as the Plains Attack. By the year 2000, terrorists had made their way into the United States. US officials knew the group were targeting their country, but didn't know where. They were taken by surprise when the well-organised attack finally happened. On Tuesday, September the 11th, 2001, Al-Qaeda's terrible plan was carried out. 4 teams of terrorists took control of 4 flights shortly after they'd taken off. The terrorists had been trained to fly planes. 2 were crashed into the enormous Twin Towers in New York, and 1 into the Pentagon, which is the home of America's military, in Washington, D.C. The 4th flight crashed after its passengers fought back and took action to prevent the plane reaching its target. In New York, the 2 towers collapsed following the attack. Debris was found almost 3 miles away. 3,000 people died in the attacks, including several hundred emergency workers who raced to help. US President George Bush addressed the nation on the evening of the attacks. Part of his address said,
Today our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America.
The attacks led to President Bush declaring a war on terror. America and its allies, including the UK, promised to hunt down the leaders of Al-Qaeda and bring them to justice. 20 years ago, the group called the Taliban were in charge of Afghanistan, and they allowed Al-Qaeda to operate there. So in October 2001, the US and the UK invaded Afghanistan to try and destroy Al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban from power.
You might have heard about Afghanistan a lot in the news recently, and that's because the USA ended their military presence in the country. It means the Taliban has regained control in Afghanistan, and many people living there are worried for their future. There's a guide to the history of Afghanistan on the Newsround website. 9/11 had an impact on lots of things, not only in America and Afghanistan, but here in the UK and around the world. Things like the way we travel changed, the way news is reported, how safe people feel, and how the military is used.
It shaped a lot of people. I mean, I have classmates I was in high school with who, went into the service, who became a Marine or went into the Army or became a police officer or firefighter specifically because of this, because of what happened on September the 11th.
I knew that we had gone to war. I knew there was very mixed feelings about it. Before it was oh, I live in this perfect, amazing country, and then these bad people attacked us. And then I just started to really, learn about the world more and realize that this place that I had been, living in, maybe super proud to be from, also had faults.
I think that was kind of, in my experience, when people really started getting into the whole criticizing political figures for the way they handle certain things.
The events have altered the world at large, and especially the United States of America, about what's happening. I think when you look at the news today of Afghanistan and kind of understand how we got there and why we're there.
But I do kind of think that in 2001, America was probably embraced the world a little bit more. Maybe we have security for purposes like this, but we also have love and appreciation for other cultures, because not everybody looks like you, thinks like you, and also not everybody who's different than you is bad.
It definitely changed like life from then on out, just overall, kind of how COVID has changed the way that we live our lives now. Those attacks was definitely like a thing that disjointed the way that we do things. And now there's like a new normal.